Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today, we're going to be talking about the sophomore album from Brandy Clark, called Big Day in a Small Town. You know, it should not be as easy to overlook Brandy Clark as it seems to be. Now, that's a bit of a weird statement, especially if you're coming from the country underground and have heard her name praised to high heavens, especially for her solo debut album 12 Stories in 2013. That was easily one of the best albums of that year. And yet, I bet if you mentioned her name to the average country fan, you'd be lucky to find anyone who would recognize her. And that genuinely sucks, because Brandy Clark isn't just one of the smartest and most nuanced songwriters in modern country, known for racking up the credits behind Casey Musgraves, Miranda Lambert, and even Reba McEntire, but also a powerful performer in her own right with a great voice and real stage presence. But the word of the game is subtlety. Casey Musgraves might be a little bit flashier and arguably a little bit catchier, but Brandy Clark brought real gravitas and grounded humanity to much of her material that tends to stick with you. Sadly, she's also reached 40, which means the image-obsessed mainstream country radio scene wants nothing to do with her, and even her label stabs at pushing her towards the mainstream have been mostly ignored. And this strikes me as completely asinine for the record, because one of the special things about country that it can play to an older demographic to whom Brandy Clark would probably be a huge breath of fresh air compared to, say, like Florida Georgia Line or even Carrie Underwood. But you know what? Putting aside the marketing, it does look like Brandy Clark's career is finally gaining some traction. She landed one of the best songs on the instant classic Southern Family compilation from Dave Cobb, and she landed as an opening act for Eric Church, who seems to be working overtime to restore his indie country cred with both a great album and pulling in some underrated talent on tour. And with Brandy Clark, she's even joined by producer Jay Joyce, who seems to also be working overtime in reputation repair. Now, I'll admit I've softened on Jay Joyce a bit. It's clear that he was the biggest factor to keeping quality with Cage the Elephant, and his work with Brothers Osborne and Eric Church over the past 8 months has been considerably stronger. But I wasn't sure how well he'd balance out against Brandy Clark's voice, and let's face it, he's not Dave Cobb. But that didn't mean I wasn't going to cover her sophomore album that was bound to be really good, so I dug into Big Day in a Small Town. What did I find? Well, I got pretty much exactly what I expected, because this is a damn great record. Maybe a shade weaker than 12 Stories, we'll get to why in a bit, but Big Day in a Small Town by Brandy Clark is the sort of smartly written, excellently framed, and nuanced country music that's easy to like and you probably immediately expect from her. The biggest changes come in production and scope, and while I'll definitely say that Jay Joyce doesn't quite stick the landing here consistently, it's definitely one of the more subtle and balanced projects in his discography and shows him on the right path. And really, this review does kind of fall into two parts with that, as I get the odd impression that Joyce is trying to reconcile his typical production instincts to work with Brandy Clark's writing, who is distinctly more nuanced and cutting than most of the broad strokes that Jay Joyce has utilized in the past. And while that tension did lead to some great tracks, it also means there are moments here that don't quite hold together and don't quite elevate this album up to the level of 12 Stories. And we're going to start with the production, because as much as I've ragged on Jay Joyce in the past, he has improved by leaps and bounds, and records like this one and Eric Church's Mr. Misunderstood are proof of it. Yeah, he cranks up the percussion a little heavier than I'd normally prefer, and his lack of subtlety means that there are instrumental moments that hit with a broader punch than they probably should, but they're definitely steps in the right direction here, most because Brandy Clark has enough firepower as a singer to meet him halfway. It helps that she's got her own broader moments in the writing, like on the huge banjo-driven hook of Soap Opera, the sizzling country funk of Broke with a gurgling bass line, or the big bass drum hits and backing vocals of the title track. That's where we get to the raw fury behind Girl Next Door, a song that I actually like, with its choppy looped guitar, the stellar melody line, the sandy percussion that builds to a synth touch hook that might have benefited from a slightly sharper electric guitar line, but that song still kicks all amounts of ass. The funny thing is that when this album slows down a bit, Jay Joyce has a good enough command of depth and atmosphere to make the gentle mid-tempo acoustics of Homecoming Queen, or the sparse piano ballad of You Can Come Over, or the bass-touched acoustics on Three Kids No Husband, or the haunted emptiness of the heartbreaking album closer Since You've Gone to Heaven, and he makes these songs really come together. They work really well. But then there's Daughter, which actually has Casey Musgraves contributing backing vocals to that song, and I'll be blunt, for as much as I like that track and enjoyed Brandy Clark trying for a Lindy Ortega sound, it also shows just how out of his depth Jay Joyce is when trying to replicate a more organic or even borderline traditional country sound. There's a difference between sounding weather and organic and just sounding kind of dated, and for as much as I can appreciate Daughter for some of the writing, it definitely falls into the latter category with production. And yeah, this is where we get to the big elephant in the room. For as much as I appreciate Brandy Clark trying to keep a more polished sound that might have a chance in hell of hitting mainstream radio, with rare exception, I can point to her performance on I Cried off of Southern Family and say she's way better in that lane with that production. And I know that's not fair to Jay Joyce, who's clearly trying, but he's not Dave Cobb, and I've always found Brandy Clark most compelling when her production can at least match the subtlety of the writing. Dave Brainard got that for the most part when he produced 12 Stories, and I'm not quite sure Jay Joyce is there yet as a producer. He's getting there, but he's not there yet. But then again, I'd also make the comment that by trying to meet him in the middle with the writing, I'm a little less impressed by Brandy Clark on this album. And for the most part, that's not her fault either. She's a damn great songwriter with an ear for flow and meter and a knack for some incredibly clever and well-framed writing that I've heard consistently for the past 5 years, either on her records or by proxy. And again, there's not a bad song on this album, but I would argue that Brandy Clark is treading some ground that she's touched on before. And in comparison with 12 Stories, it's not quite as sharp or original. The songs don't quite jump out at me in the same way. Now again, none of that is saying that the writing is bad, far from it. Brandy Clark is a storyteller, and she's got a knack for painting very vivid, powerful images and writing some complex and detailed characters. And of course, there's a strong feminist bent to the writing, but it's a much more mature picture than you get with the broad, glitzy strokes of Carrie Underwood, or even the carefree earnestness of Casey Musgraves. Although, with songs like Girl Next Door, she proves that she's just as capable of a cutting anthem than anybody else in the industry. To put it bluntly, the small-town women that Brandy Clark writes about are often older, more tired, and are stuck in the sort of hopeless conditions where there's no comfortable answer or escape. So the comedy of songs like Broke, the title track, and Daughter is really quite black. In the latter case, hoping that the guy that screwed her over and then lied about her to everybody in town, then he has daughters, so we can appreciate the sort of fear when guys like him go after his girls. Yeah, kind of perpetuating the analogous system, but it is played for more of a joke, so I'm kind of tentatively okay with it. But make no mistake here, one of Brandy Clark's biggest strengths, consistent strengths, is her ability to not pull punches in honestly framed songs. And that's why the Faded Dreams of Homecoming Queen, the Ashes of an Old Flame on You Can Come Over, and the Loneliness of the Mother on 3 Kids No Husband hit with such real impact. And then there's Since You've Gone to Heaven, as the sort of closer that is a gutting track, the sort of downer ending that most albums wouldn't dare to try, and yet shows the lingering decay that can happen after a major loss in the family just rips everything asunder. And that weight that death carries colors how Brandy Clark sees the world around her, with a small town decay and even sharper relief as the family struggles to move on. There will be a lot of comparisons drawn to I Cried off of Southern Family, but you know what? I think this song might actually be better than that track. But you know what this album reminded me of more than anything, was another underappreciated modern country record, and that was from Jennifer Nettles, Playing with Fire. And yeah, some of that's kind of inevitable. Brandy Clark co-wrote most of that album after all, but Big Day in a Small Town is really the darker side of that same coin. Where Nettles is more comfortable in pop country with more optimistic dreams going forward, Brandy Clark is more realistic and sees just how these dreams can fall short. And for me, both albums are incredibly close when it comes to quality, because Big Day in a Small Town is excellent. I feel that both these albums are going to get underappreciated because country radio doesn't know what the hell it's doing, and Brandy Clark is writing more mature music than country radio can handle. Yes, I'm trying to say something there, but it doesn't mean that there isn't an audience who loves great writing, a fiery performance, and production that might have a few missteps, but only in comparison with some of the best country music that's been released in recent memory. As such, it's a strong 8 out of 10 from me, and most certainly a recommendation. Folks, country radio isn't going to play Brandy Clark. I'm still going to make a point of championing it, so definitely check this album out. You will not regret it. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. What was your opinion of this album? Did you think it lived up to 12 Stories, or just kind of fell short, didn't quite get all the way there? That's kind of where I fell after all, but the album is still awesome. You should all check it out. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums come out that you want me to take a look at, I will try to give them a listen. My schedule kind of piling up before the mid-year, and that's going to be a big thing, so stay tuned for that. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.